And thanks everybody for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us. As mentioned, my name's Joe Iconseer. I've been with Imagine It for, it's one of those things where like the first bullet here of 28 plus years getting to that stage of life. I probably need to update my headshot. There's a little more gray than there was at the time that photo was taken. But I've been with Imagine It for about 22 years now. And during all of that time, nearly all of that time, I've been working in some various mode of being part of the what we'll call just the general AEC world, architecture, engineering, construction, but then also working with various owner groups, whether they be universities, different types of governmental agencies, you name it. And one of the things that came around from that is with all this time that we've had working in these different worlds, for the longest time, all those worlds were very separate. They did different things in different places in different ways, and there's been any number of different graphs and charts and people talking about data loss at different stages of design and construction. There was always a big drop whenever there was a turnover of information from design or renovation of a building into the ongoing management and maintenance of that building over the next 50, 100 years or whatever else. So as I've done all these different things and gotten to the spot now where I'm now acting as a director of this team that works with buildings, be it design, construction, or facilities management. Well, about 6 years ago, we went through and said, you know what? We need to revisit what we're doing and maybe formalize what we're taking in as far as data to be able to understand what's happening in this gap between what was now this BIM world, what was a CAD world is now a BIM world, and facilities management. And I say 6 years ago, and it says this is a fifth survey, because we took a gap year. Last year at this time, COVID, the pandemic, everything was just had everybody just, nobody really was in any normal space. Not to say we're in a normal space now, but we skipped a year. Just with as much things as were going on, any data that we would have collected would have been an aberration from normal, or what was in the past, what will be, and going into the future. So we skipped it for a year and came back into it. So the point of the webcast we're having here, the conversation we're having here, is to talk about the survey, to say, well, what have we been uncovering, not just now in this latest version of the survey, but when we compare it to the previous versions. What's been out there? How does the data, what are the trends that we can determine? What can we try to predict going into the future of what's going to be next based off of some of these questions and things that we've been asking and getting feedback on? And it's good things. It gives us data points, data that we can hopefully turn into actionable information to make some decisions on of how we're going about and what we're doing in a business climate. Now, there's one significant change that came around in this latest iteration of our survey. We issued the survey just a couple months back, and over a period of roughly about 2 weeks, we got response from over 700, almost 750 different people in the respondents. And if we look at it, almost a little bit less than half of people were in the architecture, building design side. If we take architecture and engineering design, yeah, we're over, just slightly over half of the respondents were from, we'll say, that AE side of things. Maybe a third, roughly, coming from the building owner side. And now that's a change, and it's a very notable difference. We did some specific partnering for this iteration of the survey, matching up with some different owner facility management agencies to get a wider distribution of the survey response. For comparison, in 2019, the last time we ran this survey, just over 13% of the respondents were in the facilities management building owner category. And just now we're just shy of 32% from just a technical number standpoint. So it's a significant increase in the number of facilities managers or owner agencies that came into helping us out with this survey. And that has an impact, and we'll talk about it as we're going through here. the total number of people in construction, engineering, and building design, architectural building design, those quantities of folks were about the same, good enough for our purposes. But there was a definite shift in the building owner side, and that's all for the positive. It's a good thing for us. Now, each year we've been doing what we can to largely ask the same questions. If we needed to, tweaking them a little bit for trends and things that are happening, and there are times where we've been able to add in new questions as new technologies emerge, new tendencies or things emerge, or we want to track different things. So you'll see a little bit as we're going through here of places like this where we've got 2018, 19, and 2021 all listed through here. We didn't get the full breadth of everything in every slide as we're pulling it through, but they're all the other places where you might see a chart where there's something showing data for 2018 and 19, or sorry, there's no data in 2018 and only 19 and 21, or something along those lines. And there's the reason why. And for these slides, as we're going through it all, sometimes I did a little bit of abbreviation just to get the wordiness down. But at the top of the slide, we do have the specific question that was asked. And depending on the nature of the question, it would have been asked to everybody that came in for the survey. And in some places, it would be specifically to just the owners or just the design and construction side. And in this case, it would be a question that was asked of the designers, of the construction, the AEC side of the business. And this is one of those that kind of, you could say warms the depths of your heart or something. At least from the Imagine It side, we've been promoting and beating the drum of BIM and FM, of BIM being this holy grail of the potential for facilities management. We just need to get the different people talking to each other so that the people that are populating the model can get the information in it that an owner agency actually wants. We've been beating that drum for, well, this is 6 years of doing the survey. We've been beating the drum since before then, so we'll say a decade. And it seems like we have really turned a corner in people actually paying attention to and asking some of these questions. We'll see some data over here that helps build up the supporting data for the position that I'm taking on that. But if nothing else, just being able to see that at least on the AE side or the AEC side, the different design and construction companies think they know what their owners want. So okay, we could always be wrong and think, oh, you need this. Oh, wait, you don't need that data? Huh, let's talk and figure it out. Or we could be dead on accurate, but at least if we're going through the process and we are documenting things inside a BIM execution plan for nearly every project now, we're in a good place to be able to at least be able to say that we're planning and we're thinking about it instead of just randomly what's happening, what do we see, where are we going, things like that. So really encouraged by this particular bit of information. And as we're talking about all these things, one of the pieces I'd ask is make a comparison in the back of your head. If this is where we're seeing things from an overall trend in the community, where do you fall in? Are you in the sometimes yes or no category for this? And where do you think you fit with your colleagues, with other competing firms or organizations or partnering organizations? So if we think that the AEC firms know what their owners want, or at least are planning for it, what are you doing to provide that information? So we had a multiple choice question saying, how are you providing the data that you think that your owners want? And we're doing it by working on BIM projects more often. This is just a snapshot of the data from this last year. We are more often than not providing owners a model. We are verifying as-built documentation in a few different types of ways. We're still printing a lot of PDFs to check process. A little bit more on that coming up. We are here and there doing some different things with data sheets, booklets of information that you might use to walk the site. But the overall piece of this is still, again, encouraging. When we were looking at the survey, the percentage of respondents who said that they require BIM from an owner side, require BIM on their projects. It was either always or very often, went up dramatically in here. And I think a lot of these are corresponding to that. If it also is in there with the number of projects where we're doing a BIM execution plan and we're giving the owners what they want, the number of people who require BIM on their projects went from like roughly 20%, 21% to 2/3, 66 point something percent in this latest version of the survey. So owners are starting to require BIM a lot more. Now, owners had been requiring BIM just to help make the design and construction process better, but requiring it is actually now becoming more of a reason to, more driven by a need to tie the BIM information into ongoing facilities management. Conversely, the percentage of respondents that say they never or rarely require BIM dropped from 27 to 11, 12% in this last version. So there's a lot more people saying, we've got this stuff, we need this stuff, and let's get it out there. There was, some places where we had free form questions of saying, you just fill in the blank of what are the biggest challenges that you've got in providing this data. So we're working on BIM projects, we're providing a model, but what are the challenges in that process of working on BIM and providing a model? And it's still, and this has been consistent for all of our surveys, it is still that in one frame or another, people are saying most often that a lack of understanding is the largest issue. And it could be that the AEC community, people are talking to the wrong folks within the owner organization. You're talking to the project lead, but not the person that really needs the data. There's all sorts of things that can lead into that, but it's telling that there's still communication barriers in getting stuff done. And so if we're doing those things that we saw on the previous slide, where this is what we're delivering in parts of how we're delivering data that we say the owner needs because we did a BIM execution plan, what are the technical types of deliverables that you're giving? And in this case, we're looking back to the last 3 years of surveys to see what's going on. We do see that just a bit of an uptick on a BIM or a model being part of the deliverable. We're seeing a corresponding drop in CAD drawings. Now, if you look at that and say, well, that's more than 100% between a BIM model and CAD drawings. This is a multiple choice thing, and if you think about what we've got for deliverables, sometimes you'll have places where you say, I need to have the Revit model, and I need some DWGs because my facility management system doesn't accept Revit and I just have AutoCAD backgrounds, and I want a hard copy, and I want a PDF. That's absolutely possible and certainly likely in some projects. But if we start adding things up, the reason it adds up to more than 100% is because it's a multiple choice of what are all the different types of things that you provide to your owner clients. But as we're looking at this, some notable pieces to me is that, for one, the quantity of hard copies and PDFs are taking market downturns, dramatic downturns. Number of CAD drawings is a little bit lower as well. And so this is a little bit of Joe Iconseer interpretation of data. So we can't get every little thing going through here, but based off conversations that I have with customers across the US and Canada every day, every week, the background of information from all these things, where I'm taking this to mean is that we are doing more with BIM and integrating BIM with owner facility management systems. Because we can integrate more BIM, we don't have to do as much CAD exporting from those models. Because we're doing more digitally, we don't need to produce as many hard copies, or we don't have to present the PDFs because owner organizations are gaining the technology to natively read and work with the data that we're providing them digitally. So that's one interpretation of it. You can take this and say, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm with you, or you're full of it. That's the fun of interpreting data, where we can look at the same facts and figures and come up with two different conclusions, and that's totally fine. So, PDFs are not going to go away, just like AutoCAD is not going to go away. But generating paper copies of those PDFs is starting to fade and continue to drop down. A notable piece is, and this is really interesting for when it gets compared to some of the other questions that are coming up as well, but point clouds are continuing to incrementally get some increased utilization. At Imagine It, our team that deals with reality capture and point clouds has been crazy busy throughout the whole pandemic. And because you've got places where people can't get on site as much anymore, either because it involved plane flights, and I'm not getting on a plane, I get it. Maybe places where there's just not as many people allowed on site so much anymore. The idea of laser scanning point clouds, HDS high definition scans, reality capture, whatever name you throw at it, that's becoming more and more valuable in the world we're transitioning into. So I can see the idea of point clouds and reality capture continuing to make some incremental growth. I don't know that I'll see it make a order of magnitude change and become sort of hockey stick, but I can see that becoming more and more common. I would say on a regular basis is the nice and general way of stating it. It's gonna vary according to the industry that you serve, the type of business that you do, but it is incrementally growing. So interesting and good things to know as we get all of this integration happening and owner capabilities allowing them to do more digitally, and the digitalization or digitization, however you want to phrase it, of our industry is continuing to move. So related to PDFs, that statement I made of people are not having to generate PDFs as often, and even more than that, aren't having to generate the physical hard copy as part of the turnover. Those are still a piece of things that we're looking at. People are doing more with digital. Now, part of that comes through to say that that digital piece is not just between the AEC community and the owners, but it's also internally. Maybe, again, maybe this is a byproduct of the pandemic thing. PDFs aren't going away, but the need to print them out to do progress checks, the need to print them out to paper to do red lines and things like that is reducing. It's incremental, but it's not increasing. It's not staying steady. It is decreasing. So maybe this is another, like we've said, a side effect of the global pandemic. Like things where we have learned and are continuing to learn about remote work, maybe paper in our processes isn't as necessary as we thought. It's indicators of possibilities as we're looking here. Now, beyond this, if we're continuing on and looking at some different possibilities, we've saying, do you print PDFs to paper, or even there can be an assumed piece of printing directly to paper from your authoring software, but it's happening less. Related to that is, so how often are you doing other types of things? So if you remember, there was that chart 2 slides ago that was talking about a steady incremental increase in the volume of people that are taking advantage of point clouds, high definition scans. And then we got to this question where we were saying, well, how many people are requiring the following things on your projects? And if we look at this, it's going from, it turned it sideways because the labels on the charts were long enough. I didn't want to try to cram it in, and we got more horizontal length on the slides. But from the top is, not very often. The bottom, the dark blue on all these is always. So we had people, and let me go backwards for a minute here. If we're looking at that point clouds in 2021, somewhere slightly less than 20% of people were doing or providing a point cloud as part of the deliverable. But we come over here and we've got, certainly more than, what is it? We'll call it 16% of people are saying we're always doing a high definition scan. And between always and often, that's going to be, nearly 50% of people responding to this question do perform high definition scans on a project. So that kind of feels conflicting at first until we look at the nuance of the questions that we were asking. The earlier question is, how often do you turn over the point cloud as part of a deliverable? This question is, how often do you actually do some high definition scanning? How often do you do a drone flyover, some sort of reality capture on a project? So what we've got with this is roughly, again, we'll say 50% of customers people that were responding to this survey were saying we'll do scanning often or always on projects. But only a fraction of that time do we actually turn the point cloud over to the owner. So it does make a bit more sense when you take it into that particular light. And it may be that owners like the idea of a point cloud, or the AEC firms like the idea of a point cloud for more accurate existing conditions, getting better as-built documentation, what have you. But it may be that only a fraction of those owner organizations actually care about or have anything that can take advantage of that point cloud. I think that's continuing to slowly change as well over time. But like BIM, the idea of Revit or BIM in general, skyrocketed within the architecture, engineering, construction world before it really started grasping and taking hold inside the owner organization. So there's a gap in there. Similar, converting CAD to BIM. So in particular, if we're looking at owner organizations, talking with them on a regular basis, we've got 100 years of paper, PDF, and CAD, AutoCAD, DWG data. How do we get that into BIM? I like the idea of BIM. I know where it needs to go, but I've got so much historic information. I can't just throw a switch overnight and everything's in a model. It's going to take time to transition, and that's where this converting CAD to BIM comes through. And it's all about standards. If you need to look at information about that, first off, absolutely reach out to us and we can have those conversations. But we've got a number of different webcasts that we've had over the years of how do we go through this process of converting CAD to BIM. If you go to our website and look for something called BIM Switch, it's for the owner side of things, but it's processes and procedures and things to help out with this, the process of converting from one to another. Everybody's looking to reuse energy. Certainly, as we were in a pandemic and we had so many buildings that were minimally staffed, got to try and do what we can to reduce some of the costs in there. Encouraged by the integration of BIM and FM. Everything after the first two, after high definition scan and convert CAD to BIM, everything else in here, reduce energy through requiring BIM on projects. The often and always combination is above 50%. So more than 50% of our respondents were requiring those bottom four items, often or always, or we're doing these things often or always. If you're not familiar with COBE, go ahead and look that up from a design side. It's a data format that we can use to get data from models and other things into facility management systems. But everything's continuing to grow, so continuing to prove out the trends that we have that we're talking about. So beyond that, if we're taking that and saying we're integrating more with BIM, we're continuing to look at how we can convert CAD to BIM, we're requiring more BIM, BIM, right? Probably the only more annoying thing for me to say than that is cloud. But if we're going to look at that, how are you using it? Now, one of the easy things, the low-hanging fruit for anybody on a facility side is we're talking about space and assets. And in a Revit world, it converts into maybe area objects, maybe room objects, and our families, our component families. That's space and asset. And from an owner side, what types of tools are you using to track that information? So if we're getting a model or we're getting CAD data and spreadsheets, we're getting whatever from the design and construction of a building, renovation of a building, whatever. How are we doing this? And if you're on the AEC end, and we're separating AEC from O in this world, looking at this and saying, well, IWMS, EAM, CMMS, CAFM, what do these things mean? That this is the world of tools and categories of things that can exist on the owner side. So an integrated workplace management system, IWS, enterprise asset management, EAM, CMMS, computer managed, forgetting that one, apologies. Too many acronyms out there for sure. But as we're looking at this, computer aided facilities management, Excel, homegrown solutions, just the general ubiquitous other field. Each one of these has a little bit of a different spin on what's happening inside a facilities management world, with the idea of an integrated workplace management system being the cat's meow type of the more holistic, comprehensive look at everything that might happen within a facility and different levels within there. But it's, what are people doing? Now, an interesting piece through all of this, and this is where that very first slide that we got to of saying the number of owner respondents to our survey dramatically increased this last year. And with that, the number of people that are doing some sort of homegrown type of solution also increased in this last year. And I'll attribute that to us having a more significant number of respondents who are part of an owner or facilities management system. And so our data set, we got a wider and deeper net cast. And so we've got better data inside 2021 to be able to understand what's happening in a broader sense across the industry. So I'll say that while it looks like all of these golden bars, if we want to call it that, jump up dramatically in 2021, it's not because people just suddenly started using EAM or IWMS or homegrown solutions. I'll be of the position that we've got a much more refined and better data set to pull out information of what our owner organization's using. One of the key things with this is as we're looking at this as it relates back to the whole increased requirement and use of BIM in whatever form you define BIM, is that one way or another, most of these tools can talk with BIM. The only, other, we don't know. Homegrown, maybe yes, maybe no, depends on what they did for that solution. But IWS through Excel have different ways that we can, maybe it's a one-time export, maybe it's a live integration, but there are ways that these different tools can work with BIM. And the technical capabilities of these systems to work with BIM, with Revit, with whatever, is continuing to grow and make it easier. If I was talking about the linking of Revit with the Archibus IWMS 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was kind of rough. Today, it's not so bad. Things have improved, and it gets better over time. The next iteration of BIM, digital twins. We've had a number of different presentations, as Imagine It, over, we'll say the last 6 months even, about digital twins. We've got one coming up with talking about digital twins and the Autodesk Tandem product. Go to our website and check that one out. We've got coming, I think it's next week. It's coming up pretty quickly. Just the idea of at least Joe's interpretation of digital twin. You ask 10 people what a digital twin is, you'll probably get 20 definitions. It's out there, but I will say the idea of digital twin is taking what was BIM and the idea of BIM and virtual model that you can analyze and plug in data and do all these wonderful things with. Moving that to digital twin is we're tying that model in with the real world. So we're using sensors, we're using different types of things that are capturing data of the actual real current conditions in reality and tying that back to the model. So it's the practical application of BIM being updated and managing and working with reality as it exists today through different sensors and data feeds that are coming into it. So there's one person's analysis, but the increased use of all these technologies is making ideas of things like digital twins, of the practical application of BIM, that much more real and that much more likely that it can make things really, really work. So as we're looking at this, overall, I will say that things like Excel spreadsheets, over time, I think we'll continue to see them dropping. We're not seeing it specifically here because we had that change in overall quantity of respondents, but I do believe that the downward trend that we saw previously will continue to happen as we get more and more consolidation and improvement on what can happen inside technical systems. So going on from there, going to the next piece, when we're looking at other types of places, do your facilities perform or do any automation? In past years, we said, yeah, we've had some, but I'll say that this is probably, again, one of those things where planning that was going on in previous years, accentuated by a pandemic, has increased dramatically the need for facilities to have different levels of automation. Again, when we go to 2021, we've got our wider net of owner respondents that came through. So there's going to be some, we'll say maybe some artificial inflation that comes from getting a better set of notes about this piece. But more and more facilities are doing more and more with automation. Guess what? That ties back into data feeds that can go to BIM, which means we're starting to talk more about digital twins, the next great buzzword, right? So there's a lot more that's happening. The price of sensors has dropped considerably and will continue to drop as technology does what it does. Things become smaller and cheaper over time. And what was a $10 sensor might be $5 or even less now. Things are getting better and better as we're moving over time. So good things to know about through there. If you've got automated systems, are you linking them into your facility management system? We've asked this question for a little while now, and I'm happy to see that the overall piece, and again, maybe it's the wider net in part, but overall, the number of people that say, hey, if I've got this data, I may as well tie it into my facility system. That's a good thing. Having 15 different systems tracking 15 different things, and you've got to go to 15 different applications to track all of them or manage all of them, that's no fun. If we can use the different types of integrations that are possible, API hooks, you name it, between all these different pieces and parts, we're just that much more efficient, that much better at managing our facilities and taking advantage of sensor data, taking advantage of the automation that's possible, taking advantage of BIM, and incorporating all those pieces, tying them in together. So again, if you're going to have the sensors and automation, you certainly want a consolidated way to log, track, and control all those systems going forward. And we are seeing a good trend in that. Again, owner slide, there's some better, wider nets that we're casting for this. Happy to see that transition in here as well. So next level of this. So if we were saying, here's BIM, are you integrating BIM with your facility system? Do you have automated systems? Are you integrating automated systems with your facilities software? The next, we'll say, iteration or level of evolution or buzzword bingo, complexity, there's a number of ways we could look at this, but the Internet of Things. To a large extent, you could say the Internet of Things is take something, apply some tracking to it, a sensor or whatever, and then have it wired or wirelessly communicate to something else. Ta-da, we're talking about Internet of Things. It's not necessarily your toaster talking to your refrigerator or something, but we're not perhaps far off from that. Maybe the toaster talking to pantry to say, do you need to get another loaf of bread because you're low? Hey, and that's one level of things that we may not care about, but having other sensors be able to go through and work with, it's just simple proximity sensors to be able to say, is there somebody inside a particular room? So we know, should the lights be on? Should the HVAC systems be active for that room? Because of how long somebody was in it, do we want to make sure it gets a certain degree of cleaning that night? That type of IoT is good and useful and productive use. As I mentioned before, the price of those IoT devices, those sensors, has decreased quite a bit within the last couple of years, with the pandemic coming through and increasing the need for us to be able to track things remotely, and then coming into all the efforts that people are getting into a return to office types of strategies. Occupancy sensors, other types of IoT devices are seeing, I think, a heavy explosion of use. Now, again, when we look at the golden bars here, there will be that deeper, wider net of, is this truly an explosion of use, and how much of that is maybe just instead a better data set that we're coming through? It's a valid question, and it's a valid point to have with these slides, but I think it is, even before then, a distinctive trend of, we do need to have these sensors for understanding where people are when they're on site, and how it's going. There was a study that I was referring to in a past presentation that we had at an Imagine It online conference this last couple of months, where there was a study done where a contractor, we'll just leave the names out of it for right now, had put some tracking things on people to see, when you're on this larger construction site, where are you going? How are you moving around? Are we able to support you to let you be efficient? And they found out that some staff where we're walking miles a day to be able to go from where their work area was to where the supplies were that they needed, back and forth and back and forth. And if they just did something as simple as, move, it wasn't specifically as, but you move the pile of lumber from one area of the job site to another, they reduced the amount of time that somebody had to be spending walking all the way across the job site. So they were able to be more efficient to be able to move between where they were working and where their supplies were. But they were also able to increase safety on the job site because you don't have as many people wandering around, and should something happen and something fall, you don't have as many people wandering across the job site. They're in their focused areas. And so you've got a safer job environment by looking at these types of sensors and what's happening through there. So some really good things that can come from this idea of IoT, and more people looking to go there. That idea of no is dropping off. And I think that idea of no is dropping off, again, with a global pandemic, probably got a good serious relook over the last 12 to 18 months. Turning sideways again because of some big titles once more. But what are you trying to do from more of an owner side of doing things to try and expand your use of BIM? Now, this is doing an assumption that you want to expand your use of BIM. Based off the earlier questions, more people are doing more and more to try and require BIM more often, use it more often. Well, okay, how are you doing that? What are you doing it? And are you looking at any of these things in particular? So cloud-based project or data management, whether we're talking about the Autodesk Cloud for BIM 360 Design, BIM Collaborate Pro, Autodesk Construction Cloud. Cloud collaboration can also go into other things like Box, Dropbox, Microsoft Teams in different places. There's all these different types of cloud technologies that are out there. So we lumped them all together. But are you looking to do more with that? And a significant portion of people are already doing that. Not too many people with no plans to go there, but that certainly does exist. We're good where we are. That's fine. Doing different add-ins to Revit to help out with managing your data in different ways. There's our reality capture, high definition scanning coming around again. An interesting, significant number of people already or just beginning to do things with augmented and virtual reality. That's always been a really interesting thing for me. It's just the whole idea of AR and VR. We're still bleeding edge of the technology when it comes to augmented reality. It's there, but it's some really interesting things happening there, whether we're talking about items that are available from any number of vendors out there, Autodesk, Epic Games, you name it. Integration and working better with your facilities IT systems, transitioning from CAD to BIM. The nice thing from my perspective to see that people are talking to each other and trying to take advantage of technologies and systems that exist today. Strong majority of people are already doing going through a transition of CAD to BIM or have begun that process. If we look at that, it's going to be 75% plus or minus of people that were responding to this question are going through that process. If we take a look at it, only, we'll say maybe 8% were saying, yeah, we're not going there right now. And again, that's, if you've got 100 years of historic data sitting around in paper and DWG files, that's a hard thing to move away from. And I totally get that, and I've got a lot of respect and empathy for that position. But it does also make me happy to see people taking advantage of planning for or utilizing technology in better ways. So a lot of these things have grown just as the acceptance and growth of the use of BIM in the owner organizations are coming around. These are some of those types of trends that we're looking at. This year, a lot of those respondents are saying we're using more detailed technological systems, that IWMS, CMMS, CAFM, EAM types of things. More people are doing more with augmented virtual reality. There's a higher use of technology going on, which means that all of these different systems are being able to talk to each other better. The data interchange between the different systems is coming better. Internet of Things is becoming more and more of a reality, and Internet of Things to me is going to be a critical component to the idea of digital twins. that blending of all the data from not just design, construction, and managing the facility, but the active representation of what's that facility really like today. I mean, digital twin can go to statewide levels to campus-wide levels, not just an individual building. There's scalability and all of that, but all of this is becoming more and more integrated, and the systems are allowing data to pass between them more and more easily as time is going on. So those are some of the really big highlights of what we had coming out from our system. We'll be having a white paper coming out shortly that'll be talking about all these things that'll be available for everybody as well. And we're going to continue doing this survey going into the future. Hopefully this gives you some idea of where you might be in your world of comparing yourself to people that were also taking part of this survey, and your relative position in these different categories. But what's it mean? If this is the comparison of where we are today, taking that healthy slice of customers and people responding to the survey and seeing where the trends are leading to now, well, what's it mean? And so personal opinion, I'll let a lot through there, but just to summarize a lot of that as we're staring at a blank wall trying to figure all this out, BIM adoption is continuing to accelerate among owners. So a lot of these things may have been impacted by the global pandemic that is out there, and hopefully mostly allowing us to get to our new normal now. But that adoption is continuing to accelerate. And I think that's largely driven by the technology that owner organizations are using being better able to support BIM deliverables. I would say the digital twins are becoming a reality today. If you take my interpretation and definition of a digital twin being it's a model that's got sensor feeds coming into it, you can do it today. We've had it's maybe 2-3 years old now, a proof of concept where we took a sensor, a location sensor, put it on the bottom of a Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head and had them in different positions within our corporate office in Baltimore. Had that tied into the Autodesk Building Ops system for work order management. And we were able to track and say, here is where that particular thing is. It could easily be a piece of equipment or a mobile cart or you name it. But it was pulling in sensor data to be able to feed a facility management system. That was years ago. We're still there. It's reality today. The cost and practicality of it is becoming better and better as things get smaller and cheaper. So both AEC and building owners, we're seeing the advantage. We're taking more advantage of the possibilities of BIM in the overall building life cycle, not just design and construction. But while it's being required more, it's being used more, owners want it more, we're not still getting everybody the data that they want or need on a regular basis. I would say based off some things that I've been seeing more recently, there's still an issue with standards of getting a model coming in, and things like in Revit, a family name and a type name is actually really, really important on the owner end for integrating it into a facility system. And it can't underemphasize that enough. That's really important. And so if we don't have a standard in there that says, here is how I need the standard for these things to be, my data standard, my object naming standard to be, and we're not enforcing it, we're missing the boat a little bit. So it's things are getting tighter, and I'm so happy to see that coming around, but there's still room to grow. Still a lot of room to grow. With that being said, we're going to continue, as I mentioned, doing this survey time and time again and continue to track where things are going and what people are doing and how they're doing it and things like that. I think this gives us a good spot to understand where we are, where we see the industry going, and your position in it, to know, are there places where maybe there is something that you could start doing now, or we're sitting pretty good. We may not be in the majority for all these things, but we're happy with where we are. It's context to be able to drive what you've got going with your company, with your business, and helping out with decisions. There's, again, more information coming from this in white papers later. If we're looking at more information on digital twins, we've got a tandem webinar coming around. We've got a webinar for building ops coming around, all sorts of different things that are tying in all these different solutions together. With that, I'll say, reach out to us if you've got any questions. Reach out to your account manager. You've got my information there as well. Let's see where we can have some conversations and see where that next thing might be for you. I'll say thank you all very much. We'll pause.